Thank you, James. We'll talk to you soon. Let's go live to Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer. Thanks very much for your time. Treasurer, 3 days to go.
Good morning, Kieran.
The Liberal Party tried to focus on first home buyers at the launch, but been a bit of scrutiny since because it didn't go to Cabinet. Wouldn't it have been better to tick off with Cabinet approval and do some sort of due diligence before announcing it?
Well, due diligence was done, consultation with stakeholders was had, and we've announced a policy which will make a real difference to first home buyers coming into the market. You see, it's very difficult for particularly young people to get the 20% deposit that they need to get into a foot in the door in the home market. And we're now saying that they can get as little as a 5% deposit. The government will stand in and guarantee the difference. And at the same time, this will allow people to get equity in their home for the first time, and I think that's a good initiative, and obviously good enough for the Labor Party to copy without even seeing the full details.
Well, it only covers a fraction of first home buyers, so is there scope to expand this, and what will it do to house prices more broadly?
Well, as I have said previously, I don't think the impact on house prices will be significant, because we're talking about 10,000 new first home buyers getting that support from the government. There's about 110,000 first home buyers who are coming into the market each year, and about 600,000, Laura, buyers who are getting home loans to come into the market each year. So the proportion is not large, but it is very significant for the people who are involved. And obviously we're making a $500 million equity commitment up front through the National Housing Infrastructure and Financing Corporation. But what we will see is obviously if there is strong demand for this, then we'll revisit that at that point in time.
The campaign took an unusual turn yesterday with Bill Shorten questioning the Prime Minister over his religious beliefs. What's your take on this as part of the political campaign? Because obviously both leaders, they're Christians. We know that they both go to church. Is this fair game, or is it a bit low rent, as the Prime Minister would suggest?
Yeah, I thought this was a very unfortunate intervention by Bill Shorten, bringing the Prime Minister's religion into the debate. I think it reflected how desperate he is in these dying days of the campaign. Let's face it, Bill Shorten's had a shocker of a campaign. He looked down the camera and told Australians he wasn't increasing their taxes on super, only to correct that a day later saying he didn't really understand or hear the question, and in fact he was giving them $34 billion of higher super taxes. He met that Gladstone worker who asked him what he was doing to cut taxes for him, and he told him, oh, he'll look into it, without coming clean with that worker and saying that that he was going to increase the top marginal rate of tax. He hasn't been able to explain the cost of his energy policy, even though more than 2 million Australians have voted. And this is another very, very desperate stunt by Bill Shorten to detract and to distract from what the real issue in this campaign, Laura and Kieran, is about the strength of the Australian economy going forward. Our economic plan is set out in the budget, and Labor's $387 billion of higher taxes on retirees, homeowners, renters, superannuants and family business owners.
We have a bit more detail on one of those policies from Labor, and this is the franking credit scheme or reform of it. ANU have modelled the tax plan, and it says that 90% of all franking credits claimed are paid to the top 20%, 2.7% to the bottom 50. Is that in line with what you see in this policy?
Well, the number you should focus on is the fact that over 80% of those people who will be hit by Labor's retirees tax have a taxable income of less than $37,000. These are people who have done nothing wrong except diligently save for their own retirement, and some of them will be pushed onto the pension as a result of Labor's policy. Again, detail that was missing from Labor's costings. What's going to be the increase to the budget bottom line for pushing people onto the pension?
This detail, Treasurer, also says the average impact across all households is about $489. That is not the big hit that you're suggesting, is it?
Well, actually, in Labor's costings and in Treasury's costings, this is a $57 billion hit on retirees, Laura. And I put this to you. Bill Shorten's made a big song and dance about his taxes on multinationals. He's talking about getting an extra $2 billion from multinationals, but $57 billion from retirees. It goes to where his priorities are. I mean, this policy from Labor on retirees tax has been all about targeting aspiration, inspiration and perspiration. That's what one writer from Americaville said, because these are people who've done nothing wrong.
Can't they avoid the impost if they simply move, for example, you know, self-managed super funds, move to retail funds? Is that one way they can manage that? I mean, this impost, they can invest elsewhere, can't they?
Well, firstly, the answer to that question is not necessarily. But the second point to the question is you're actually underlying this class warfare point that and this attack that Bill Shorten is undertaking. I mean, what's he got against self-funded retirees? What's he got against people putting aside a bit of their hard-earned money every month to save for their retirement under rules that have been in place for 20 years? You see, it's an accepted principle of tax law that the company pays tax on behalf of the shareholders. And then the shareholders will get a cash refund if their marginal rate is under 30 cents in the dollar. And if their marginal rate is above 30 cents in the dollar, then they'll have to pay a little bit more. And yesterday in Burnie, Bill Shorten again put another chapter in his attack on hard-working Australians by saying retirees were complaining about their franking credits when they were sitting on the back deck of their yacht. I mean, what an insult, Kieran. What an insult to people who have done nothing wrong except save for their own retirement. Bill Shorten is calling small businesses fat cats. Right? He's launched a tax on big business. He wants to give the unions the free run of every workplace. And now he's attacking again retirees as people are putting their feet up on the back deck of their yacht. I mean, let's listen to Chris Bowen for a change when he says, if you don't like this policy, don't vote for it.
Look, speaking of the economy and the headwinds that are ahead, that is most apparent with China v the US at the moment, this escalating trade war. You warn about headwinds down the track. Is there anything Australia can do to shield itself, or do you just have to ride this one out?
Well, you're right, Laura. There are growing global economic headwinds, but also some domestic challenges as well, because China is our number one trading partner and the United States is our number one investment partner. And those trade tensions have been escalating with the imposition of 25% tariffs on each other's goods. At the same time, global economic growth has been downgraded by the International Monetary Fund, as well as in our own budget just a few weeks ago. And then we're seeing the impact of both flood and drought here at home. So it's the worst possible time for Labor's $387 billion of higher taxes, particularly on the housing market, because housing prices have come down, but yet Bill Shorten is still trying to prosecute the case for abolishing negative gearing as we know it and increasing capital gains tax by 50%. You see, in the UK, they have a capital gains tax rate of 30%. In the US, it's 20%. And Bill Shorten wants to give Australians a 50% rate of tax. And this policy from the Labor Party was taken to their shadow cabinet by Chris Bowen 19 times, which shows you how hesitant they were about actually implementing it. And Wayne Swan said it would be economically disastrous to abolish or to change negative gearing.
You've been talking a lot about Labor's costings. Since your budget, you've announced at least $1.3 billion in spending, the East-West link, the first home buyers policy, among others. Will you release updated costings?
Yes, they should be out tomorrow, Kieran, and we have submitted all those documents to Treasury and Finance, which is the normal course of it. But as you point out, our spending through this campaign has been minimal compared to what Labor's high spending has been through this campaign. We set out pretty much the vast majority of our programs and initiatives in the budget. They were all fully costed, fully funded. But for example, in Labor's costings put out just last week, there was a big black hole when it came to their promises on aid, research and development, childcare workers and their wages, and a few other areas.
Treasurer, have you told your constituents in Kooyong that you've promised the Nationals that a coal-fired power station in North Queensland is on the cards?
Good try, Laura. I mean, the reality is there is a review that is taking place in North Queensland, but what I've said to...
Well, the Nationals think they might be getting one, so which is it?
What I've said to my constituents in Kooyong is that I'm fighting hard to lower their power bills, and in the last inflation numbers, the power bills came down. Under Labor, when they were last in office, power bills doubled, and we've seen recklessly high targets that are not costed and not funded by the Labor Party. We have a very clear set of policies to reduce people's power bills, including underwriting new generation, including following the ACCC's recommendations about setting a default offer, and about ensuring that we have the right energy mix. And it's very clear that more wind and more solar is coming into the system, but we need to smooth out that transition so that we don't see major spikes in power prices. And that's why Snowy 2.0, which has been very well received by the people in Kooyong and across the country, will become a reality under the coalition government.
He's going to be focusing... Bill Shorten's focusing on wages today and particularly targeting the coalition's preference deal with Clive Palmer. Was that a mistake, given Palmer's vote looks like it's coming off the boil a bit with a bit of scrutiny? He has, as you know, not paid all the entitlements to workers at that Queensland nickel refinery. Has this been an own goal from the coalition in this campaign to you know, have a preference deal with that particular individual?
Well, Bill Shorten is not only the bill that Australia cannot afford, Kieran, but he's also, his middle name must be hypocrisy, because he was chasing a preference deal with Clive Palmer. In fact, he missed out, and Clive Palmer has turned his guns onto Bill Shorten.
But you did the reality deal. You did the deal with this controversial businessman, to say the least. I mean, his advertising has been misleading, as we know. The Premier in WA has been scathing about the ads from Palmer. Palmer's making all sorts of claims. His policy, you know, manifesto, for want of a better phrase, is has barely any detail in it, and you're doing a preference deal with him.
Well, what I'm saying to the people across Australia is put one, Liberal and National. That's the clear message to them. The Labor Party have a preference deal with the Greens. The Greens want to weaken the US alliance. They want to increase your taxes. You've even got candidates who are talking enthusiastically in the Greens about death duties, as well as, dare I say it, on the Labor side as well. That's a very clear alternative to the coalition. But I was asked by Laura about Bill Shorten talking about wages today. The real question for Bill Shorten this morning is, will he come clean about what happened at Clean Event? Will he tell the workers of Clean Event that he's sorry that they saw their penalty rates cut because of some special deal with the unions to boost their membership? Okay. That's the real question. He has no credibility on wages.
Just to be fair, one of the questions that voters would be asking themselves as they vote over the next couple of days and on Saturday is, what have you promised Clive Palmer if he does get a spot in the Senate? Will you horse trade with him on policy?
We promised nothing. And what we are focused on is ensuring that the Liberals and National candidates get elected across the country. That's the clear choice at this election. $387 billion of higher taxes from Bill Shorten on your housing, on retirees, on superannuants, on family businesses, on income earners. When you get up in the morning, you'll pay higher taxes. But when it comes to wages, the answer to higher wages is not higher taxes. That's why Bill Shorten will spend more, tax more, and lead to a weaker Australian economy.
Treasurer, appreciate your time this morning. We'll speak to you soon. A quick break here on AM Agenda.